The Oscars clearly have a horror problem. In nearly 100 years of the Academy Awards, only 9 horror movies have ever managed to secure a Best Picture nomination. Today, we're going to go through all of them, including this year's nominees. And of course, we'll start with The Exorcist. Some people might argue that the first horror movie to get a Best Picture nomination was Gaslight from 1944, but that film is really closer to a noir-style psychological mystery than a true horror movie. And it's also worth pointing out, especially for younger viewers, that horror has never suffered from a lack of great films. Just go back a few years, and you already have movies like Rosemary's Baby and Night of the Living Dead. These films were influential and widely discussed. But when it came to the Best Picture lineup, the Academy mostly kept its distance. That only changed at the 1974 Oscars with The Exorcist. The film is based on the novel by William Peter Blatty and was directed by William Friedkin, coming off The French Connection, a recent Best Picture winner. So there was already a lot of attention around Friedkin's next film, but the reputation of The Exorcist didn't grow out of hype alone. The film pushed boundaries and delivered a real masterclass in filmmaking. Now it's hard to find something to say about The Exorcist that hasn't been said already. It's one of the best horror films of all time and simply one of the greatest films ever made. You might think you'd need to believe in demons for it to be scary. But no. Friedkin's film gets under your skin anyway. Critics at the time were divided. Variety called it an expertly told supernatural horror story and praised the final scenes for their sheer cinematic terror. The New York Times was far less impressed and described it as a chunk of elegant occultist claptrap, saying it established a new low for grotesque special effects. The Academy couldn't help but notice. The Exorcist ended up with a staggering 10 Oscar nominations. It only won 2 though, Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Sound. Best Picture that year went to The Sting, a movie far fewer people remember today. It only took 2 years for horror to return to the Best Picture lineup. In 1975, Steven Spielberg's Jaws didn't just scare audiences. It practically invented the modern summer blockbuster. In a way, it also killed the shark genre. Most shark movies today are either B-movie chaos or outright parodies. Every now and then, someone tries to make a serious thriller like The Shallows, but it usually just reminds us how perfectly Spielberg already handled the premise. He said everything that needed to be said, and he did it with a mechanical shark that barely worked. The film was a cultural juggernaut, becoming the highest-grossing movie ever released at the time. That massive success translated into 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. Jaws eventually took home 3 awards for editing, sound, and of course, that iconic 2-note score by John Williams. But Best Picture that year went to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And let me share a funny story about what was happening behind the scenes when the nominations were announced. Steven Spielberg was so confident about the film's chances that he even set up a camera to capture his reaction. At 29 years old, he wasn't just hoping for a nomination, he was expecting a total sweep, including a Best Director nod for himself.
My name is Steve Spielberg, and I just directed a movie called Jaws, and Jaws is about to be nominated in 11 categories. You're about to see us sweep the nominations. We're very confident at this very moment, and so if you all have a seat, we'll get on with it.
As it turned out, the sweep Spielberg expected didn't happen. He was left out of the Best Director race entirely. He had to wait until Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1978 for his first nomination, and all the way until Schindler's List in 1994 for an actual win. After Jaws, the Academy essentially shut its doors to horror for 16 years. But when the genre finally returned to the Best Picture lineup in 1991, it resulted in an absolute triumph. The Silence of the Lambs remains the first and so far the only horror film to ever win Best Picture. It also swept the so-called Big Five awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Screenplay. In the entire history of the Oscars, only 2 other films have managed to do that. The most recent before The Silence of the Lambs was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the same movie that beat Jaws for Best Picture. While The Silence of the Lambs raised the bar for what a horror film could be, after all, not many Oscar winners feature a character biting someone's face off, it also paved the way for a whole series of Hannibal Lecter movies: Hannibal, Red Dragon, and Hannibal Rising, which, frankly, might be the film's only real crime. And of course, we have to talk about Anthony Hopkins. Even today, when you rewatch the film, his performance still feels completely convincing. For a moment, you might even forget who you're dealing with. And Hannibal Lecter has probably been parodied more than almost any Oscar-winning role since Marlon Brando in The Godfather. Next on the list is The Sixth Sense, which showed up at the 2000 Oscars. Bruce Willis and Toni Collette, who incidentally thought she was making a beautiful, spiritual story, not a horror film, are both at the top of their game here. Today, it might not be the kind of movie people rush to rewatch, but at the time it was a global phenomenon, mostly because of that final twist. And interestingly, knowing the reveal in advance actually makes the movie more fun to revisit. The film became a massive box office success, earning over $670 million worldwide on a $40 million budget. It was the second biggest film of 1999. At the Oscars, The Sixth Sense received 6 nominations, including Best Director for M. Night Shyamalan and Best Supporting Actor for 11-year-old Haley Joel Osment. But in the end, it didn't win any. That year, Best Picture went to American Beauty. In 2011, the body horror of Black Swan slipped into the Oscars' top category, disguised as a high drama from the world of ballet. But it lost to the more traditional The King's Speech. The film received 5 Oscar nominations in total. It only won 1 of them. But it was a big one. Natalie Portman took home the Oscar for Best Actress. For the role of Nina Sayers, Portman lost around 20 pounds and spent about a year training in classical ballet. Like the character she plays, she approached the role with almost obsessive dedication. 7 years later, we got Get Out, one of the standout horror movies of the decade and one of the most talked about films of the year. What's even more impressive is that the film was made on a $4.5 million budget. The Academy nominated it for Best Picture, which it lost to The Shape of Water, as well as Best Director for Jordan Peele, Best Actor for Daniel Kaluuya, and Best Original Screenplay, which it won, well-deserved. Get Out never wastes time. Even scenes that seem small at first usually turn out to matter later. With so many horror movies focused only on scares, it's refreshing to see one that clearly wants to do more. Peele combines the genre with sharp social commentary, strong performances, and even a surprising amount of humor. And now, we jump all the way to the 97th Academy Awards in 2025 with the 7th film on this list, The Substance. Possibly the grossest movie ever nominated for Best Picture. We've had violent Oscar contenders before. Saving Private Ryan showed the chaos of D-Day with unprecedented brutality, but that kind of violence was meant to feel historically accurate. The Substance is doing something very different. Its geysers of blood and body horror are part of the joke. The film isn't just horror either. It's closer to a grotesque satire about the entertainment industry and its obsession with youth and perfection. And unlike the earlier horror nominees on this list, which were relatively elegant in how they scared audiences, Coralie Fargeet's film is deliberately excessive, messy, and often outright obscene. Maybe the Academy's tastes are changing. Who knows? At the Oscars, the Best Picture statuette went to Anora. And in a bit of a meta moment, the Best Actress award went to its 25-year-old lead, Mikey Madison, even though Demi Moore was also nominated. One of this year's nominees is Ryan Coogler's Sinners. In today's film industry, it's rare for a film to be both a commercial hit and a critical favorite. Sinners pulled that off. It became the 7th highest grossing film in the US in 2025 and one of the very few original movies in the top 20, while also receiving strong reviews from critics. The Academy clearly noticed. The film received 16 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. It's a genre-bending film that blends gothic horror with historical drama. Think of it as a supernatural western that isn't afraid to tackle heavy themes of blood, belief, and survival. The story follows twin brothers who return to their hometown, hoping to leave their troubled past behind, only to discover that an even greater evil is waiting to welcome them back. Michael B. Jordan plays both brothers, Smoke and Stack, in a technically ambitious dual performance. A win at the Actor Awards is now boosting his Oscar chances, but the race for Best Picture is far from settled. Many predictions suggest that the main competition may come from Paul Thomas Anderson's new film, One Battle After Another, a safer choice for the Academy. Either way, Sinners is a great film on its own, whether it wins the Oscar or not. Definitely a must-watch if you haven't seen it yet. Guillermo del Toro had wanted to make Frankenstein for decades, and the result is one of the most personal films of his career. Oscar Isaac plays Victor Frankenstein, an obsessive scientist who creates life from assembled body parts. But the film focuses just as much on the creature he brings into the world, played by Jacob Elordi. The creature is far more sympathetic here, which arguably removes some of the moral ambiguity present in the original story. You may feel differently about that choice, but one thing is certain. Del Toro remains a cinematic master, and every costume, set, and prop is crafted with formidable imagination and meticulous attention to detail. Frankenstein received 9 Oscar nominations, but surprisingly, Guillermo del Toro himself was not nominated for Best Director. Historically, only a handful of films have ever won Best Picture without a Best Director nomination. Still, Del Toro has beaten the Academy's genre bias before with The Shape of Water, so the possibility can't be ruled out entirely. Although right now, Frankenstein feels more like an outsider in the Best Picture race.